Welcome to Nitty Gritty Real Estate. In this series, we're interviewing Matthew Cox. He's infamous for committing millions of dollars in mortgage fraud, for which he served 12 years in prison. He has an ugly past, no doubt, but we're looking beyond that to learn from his unique perspective in the industry so that we can become better real estate investors. Let's get into it.
Well, a cashback scam is like, what's interesting about that, a lot of people call it, it's like a hidden down payment, right? Or okay, so basically it's when there's different versions, right? Mm-hmm. So a lot of investors will do this. They got a house selling it let's use 100,000 for simplicity. Mm-hmm. So I'm selling a house for 100,000, right? So I bought the house for 40,000. I put 20,000 in. I got 60 grand in the house. I have a guy that wants to buy the house. I have a buyer, but he's only got maybe $1,000, but he qualifies for the loan. He can get a 95% loan. So I've got 60,000 in the house. I'm about to get $95,000, but he has to come up with his 5% down payment. Mm-hmm. So what ends up happening is he doesn't have 5% down. So what these guys end up doing is they say, look, I'll give you your down payment. And maybe they put it in the bank for him, or they'll get the borrower, or they'll get the guy gets the he'll make it look like he sold a vehicle, or he'll get it so that it looks like his parents gifted him the money, or they'll come up with a way to pass seasoning on the funds. Maybe they say, hey, go get the money out of your 401k and use that money, and then I'll give you the money back. So what happens is the borrower brings $5,000 to the closing, whether the seller gives it to him or not, it's irrelevant. He shows up with it. So now you've got $100,000 that's at the closing. The seller gets the $100,000, but he gives the borrower his $5,000 down payment back. He's doing that because he's saying he's got a buyer. He's going to make the difference, but he doesn't mind giving back $5,000 out of the $40,000 he's about to make. He makes $35,000, but he wasn't going to make anything if he hadn't sold the house, and he has a guy that's going to buy it for $100,000. So they call that a cashback scam. Really, it's also like it's a hidden down payment. You're hiding the guy's down payment. But the one that's the bigger issue, not that that's not fraud, because clearly that's fraud, but the bigger issue is a lot of times when you say, look, I got a piece of property, I bought this property for 40, I put 20 in it, but it will appraise for 140. That's a big thing in Tampa. A lot of places, you could buy a property for 50 or 60, and you can get it appraised for 200,000 because it's an up and coming area. Mm-hmm. And there are houses in that area where these what do they call them? Urban pioneers have come in, and they're paying ridiculous money for these houses. So you've got houses that are selling for 40 or 50 that can appraise for 200. What happens? A lot of these guys will go in and buy up houses for 50. Put 5 or 10 or 20,000 and whatever, clean them up a little bit, but not to the extent that they should be selling at 200,000. Then they turn around and they get buyers that will buy the property for 200,000. So you buy it from me for 200,000. I know you don't really want to buy the property for 200,000, or maybe you don't want to buy the property at all. But what I'll do is I'll give you $40,000 back. So you get a loan on the house for $180,000, and I'll give you 40 grand. You're going to buy it for $200,000. You're going to bring your down payment of $40,000. Or for let's say $40,000, you have to bring $40,000 down. Now we've got 160 plus 40. That's the loan from the bank is 160 plus your 40. That's 200,000. I'm going to get the 200,000, which of course 40,000 is my money that I gave you to bring, mm-hmm. And then I'll give you 40,000 or 20 or whatever we agree upon to go through the transaction. Now you end up with the property. Maybe you rent it out. You make 6 months worth of payments. Maybe you sell it. Maybe you just let it go into foreclosure. I actually know, I know multiple people that have had people buy properties from them for millions of dollars, then split the profit on it, and then those people go into foreclosure because they don't mind, because they made $300,000. So I don't mind going into foreclosure and I'll claim bankruptcy. I have $300,000. Most people are never going to have $300,000 at their disposal. So that happens a lot. That's a cashback. It's a cashback scam. So that's essentially what it is. You're giving people cash back at closing.
When you're moving money around all these different ways, trying to make it seem seasoned, you're also probably doing like tax evasion and stuff like that too. Because I mean, I don't know, you got all these chunks of money going places that.
Oh, listen, they can hit you with money laundering. They can hit you with wire fraud.
That's what I mean. There's these peripheral crimes that are happening.
Is there a conspiracy if 2 people are involved?
Yeah. It's actually, I think it has to be 3 people, but it doesn't. It really makes no difference at all.
Yeah.
I mean, they're going to come up with a crime that you fit.
Mm-hmm.
The laws are so liberal at this point. For instance, they were trying to hit me with like 40 or 50, I think it was like $50-something million in $50 or $55 million like in money laundering.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, what money laundering? Like, to me, money laundering was like drug dealers trying to take dirty money and then put it in the bank and then somehow or another say that they made that money doing something else.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, what money laundering? I had money wired into the bank and then I took the money out. And they were like, right, every dollar you take out of the bank that's dirty money is money laundering. I'm like, well, how else was I going to get the money? They're like, it doesn't matter. The moment you convert it to cash, it's money laundering. If it's ill-gotten funds. Well, I mean, the money laundering for $55 million is like a 30-year sentence. It's outrageous.
So even this thing, the down payment fraud, I mean, that could be considered money laundering,
Yeah,
couldn't it?
They could. It could money laundering, bank fraud, wire fraud, because you're doing this in order to get the bank to wire money to the title company so that you can make that money.
Yep.
Wire fraud.
Yep.
You're like, you would think, well, I didn't know that. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. They're going to get you on they're going to get you on something. You're breaking multiple bank fraud related charges or bank fraud related laws at that point.
Yeah.
So,
I guess when you have so many charges hanging over your head, you're going to have to plead to one of them because
if
you go to trial, I mean, that could be game over.
They're going to get you. It's over. But you can't go to You can't go to trial on these things. You just can't do it. It's just stupidity to try and go to trial, especially if you're guilty. Look, if you're not guilty and you go to trial, you got about a 50% chance of being found guilty. I mean, that's just the way it is. People don't realize that, but all of the federal statutes are in the government's favor. Now, if you were in the states are more reasonable. The feds will they can put people up there that you told Ben that I said this. You won't testify, but Ben can testify what you told him that I said. And you're like, that's hearsay. Right. That's perfectly legitimate. So Ben and 4 other people can get on the stand and say, yeah. Tyler said that Matt said this. Mm-hmm. And guess what? That's okay. It's okay. And you're going, I've never talked to this guy, and I didn't tell Tyler anything. Doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. We got 4 guys that are going to say you did it. And the fact is that most people feel like if you were indicted, you did something wrong. I know a guy named Andrew Levinson. When they were going through voir dire, voir dire is the process that they go through to determine if someone can sit on a jury. While they were going through all of his jurors, one of the jurors, when his defense lawyer stood up and said, look, can you be impartial, sit on the jury and be impartial and judge my client? The actual juror said, I don't know. Most of them say, of course. They know that's the right thing to say. He goes, I don't know. And the guy goes, you don't know? Why don't you know? He goes, well, he was indicted on 54 counts. He did something wrong. That's how most of them think. They think if you're sitting in that chair, you did something wrong. And that's true. You may have done something wrong. The real tragedy of the system is this, is that you may have done something wrong and you'll get found guilty. And at that point, all the jury has done is said, yes, Your Honor, we believe that he broke the law. And they get up and they leave. They don't get to determine what your sentence is. If you polled most juries, 99% of them would be like, yeah, he broke the law, but it's a white-collar crime and he'll probably just get probation. It's not that big of a deal. It was a couple $100,000. Nobody got hurt. He's going to get probation. Of course, a month later, 2 months later, they read in the newspaper, the guy got 5 years, or he got 20 years, or he got 10 years. And then they go, oh my God, I don't understand. What's the big deal? I mean, if you'd seen what he did, it wasn't a big deal. Right, that's why you don't get to make that determination. So the real tragedy of the federal court system is that the jurors don't know what you're facing, and they'll find you guilty just to get out of the room, or just to go home to their family and watch sitcoms and eat at McDonald's, and they don't realize what you're truly facing. So the real tragedy is the sentences that are handed out. If you go to trial, they might come to you and offer you a plea and say, look, 5 years paper, 5 years probation. You get 5 years probation. You go, no, man, I'm going to trial. I didn't do this. You go to trial, you lose, you get 10 years. The disparity between 5 years probation and 10 years is astronomical. Truth is, it's just unfair. It's just really unfair. Granted, you're guilty. But someone who shoplifts is guilty of shoplifting. Chopping off their hand is unreasonable. And that's the problem with the system. They hand out draconian sentences. And nobody cares because you're a criminal and you get what you deserve. That's the way people feel, you know. And it's nobody gives a crap until it's their brother or it's their daughter or it's their uncle. But Uncle Tommy's such a nice guy. Yeah, I understand he lied to the bank and he did steal some money and that's not right, but you shouldn't have given him 10 years. That's where the sentences are rough, bro. Your best bet is to plead guilty. I'd plead guilty to anything they put in front of me at this point, just because I know. You're done if you go to trial. You're just an idiot. Even if I was innocent, I'd plead guilty. Well, can we work a deal? What kind of a deal can I get? I mean, that's how bad it is. That's how terrified I am after being in prison and seeing all of the guys and reading the transcripts and reading their the court cases and the indictments and the FBI 302s and all of the looking through the entire thing. You're going, dear God, why didn't you plead guilty? And the guy's like, I didn't do it. I'm like, yeah, I agree you didn't do it, but you went to trial and got 17 years.
Let me ask this: so what is the difference between a guilty guy who pleads guilty and a guilty guy who pleads innocent? They're both going to prison, right? I mean, they're both whether the guilty guy is, I'm saying the guilty guy, he pleads innocent, but he's found guilty. You know what I mean? Same guy, he's just pleading two different ways. Why is the result so different?
You mean that between pleading guilty and between taking a plea agreement and going to trial?
Yes.
Okay, because you're saving the government a ton of money.
Okay, that's the difference.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
You're saving them the cost and time of having to take you to trial. So if they get you, you make them drag out, one, of course, the investigation is months and months long, and the preparation for trial is a long time. It takes a long time. Then you had to go through a 4-day trial. Then you were found guilty. Now you were going to get 3 years, but now we found you guilty. We're going to absolutely hammer you.
So it's because of this added cost to the system where they really stick it to you.
They say that it's that, and it's your failure to accept responsibility. One of the things in the federal system is if you plead guilty, you get a certain amount of levels off your sentencing guidelines. And if you accept responsibility, so they don't just let you plead guilty. You basically have to get in front of the court and you have to say, I plead guilty, I accept responsibility, this is what I did. You have to basically own up to what you did. And that really seals your fate. Because if you later come back and say, I want to fight this, I want that, then they're like, yeah, well, you said this, and you signed this. You said you did it. It's hard to get around.
They also often report in the news that a lot of the prosecutors, they have big egos, they're trying to make a name on a case. Then, if they do well with their cases, their name is known, then they further their political career. Mayor,
they
governor.
can become a supervising U.S. attorney. They can run for U.S. They could become a possible U.S. attorney. They could go on to run for governor or mayor. They could run for. Of course, it's huge. Look, that's how basically Robert Mueller cut his teeth. He was a tough prosecutor, and he ended up becoming FBI director. He wanted to be attorney general. He was an assistant U.S. attorney, then he became a U.S. attorney, then he went and became an FBI director. He wanted to become attorney general, like I said, but I think Robert Ashcroft, they picked Robert Ashcroft. So, yeah, it's rough. It's not nothing to fuck around with.